We're back in Kailua, and this Kalaheo Hillside home has been on the market just for 6 days, and the offers are due today.
And here's the number that on-camera line doesn't tell you. Right now, this pocket of Kailua is sitting on 1 month of housing supply. The rest of Oahu has 3.5. That's the whole story behind why offers on this house are due today, and I want to walk you through exactly what that gap means. Using the actual sales, cancellations, and relistings from this neighborhood over the last year, not just this one listing. I'm not going to spend this video pointing out cabinets and countertops. I'm going to show you the data, what it means if you're trying to buy here, and what it means if you're the one selling. We're in Kalaheo Hillside on the Kailua side of Kaneohibe Drive, a neighborhood that goes back to the 1950s. A developer named Q.C. Lam built this area out between 1953 and 1961 in phases, 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch homes marketed as comfortable, informal Hawaii living. Some sections were built by Lam himself, some were designed by the firm Wimberly & Cook, and the last phase was built by a mainland developer as what they called a pilot project, to test what buyers wanted and what price would sell. The earliest of these homes came with ceramic tile baths, asphalt tile floors, redwood or mahogany siding, and asbestos shingle roofs. Land here was originally leased, not owned, under 55-year leases. Nearly everything for sale in this neighborhood today, including this home, has since converted to fee simple, meaning the land is owned outright, with no lease payment and no lease expiration to plan around. That's a meaningful difference from a leasehold purchase where you're only buying the structure and renting the ground under it for a set term, and the value of that lease erodes as it gets closer to expiring. Fee simple is the norm here now, and it's part of why this land can carry the kind of value we're about to get into. This section is zoned R10, which sets a 10,000 square foot minimum lot size, and it's part of why these lots run spread out with room between houses instead of packed in close. Practically, that zoning is also why you'll see so many additions and rebuilds through here over the decades. There's room on these lots to add a second story or expand the footprint without running into a setback problem, which isn't true in some of the tighter zoned pockets of Kailua. This home sits on 10,366 square feet, which, and I'll come back to this, is the largest lot of any home that's sold in this neighborhood in the last 12 months. Inside, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 1,770 square feet. And here's the first number I want you to sit with. Over the last 12 months, homes in Kalaheo Hillside have sold at a median of $1.6 million, in a median of 13 days. Across all of Oahu, that same median days on market is 21 days. This neighborhood is moving 38% faster than the island average, at a price point most of the island isn't touching. Months of supply is the number that explains why. It tells you at the current sales pace how long it would take to sell through everything on the market if nothing new got listed. Under 3 months, that's a seller's market. Over 6, buyers have the leverage. Kalaheo Hillside is sitting at 1 month. Oahu-wide, it's 3.5. If you've been watching this neighborhood from the sidelines waiting for more selection, the data says that wait might cost you more than it saves you. Before I get into the sales data, if a market moving this fast has you wondering how you'd even compete, here's something worth knowing. There are close to 100 homes across Oahu right now, in every price range and every neighborhood, where you can take over the seller's existing loan instead of taking out a new one, some of them locked in the 2 to 3% range. I pull that full list twice a month. Click the link below, drop your email, and I'll send it over free. Now let's get into what's actually been selling here, because the pattern is clean once you see it. 11 homes closed in Kalaheo Hillside over the past year, and the 5 fastest sales all had one thing in common. Every single one was under 1,850 square feet. The 2 slowest sales were also the 2 largest homes that sold. At 32 days and 98 days on market. Size, not price, is what's splitting this market into fast and slow. Here's the full picture, fastest to slowest. One home sold for $1.6 million in just 3 days. Another sold for $1.56 million in 6 days. A third sold for $1.505 million, also in 6 days, with a $4,000 concession. Next, $1.915 million in 8 days. Then a relisted home, one I'll come back to in a minute, at $1.5 million in 11 days. A newer construction home from 2019 sold for $2.229 million in 12 days. Another sold for $1.975 million in 14 days. One sold for $1.1 million in 19 days. Another went for $2.16 million in 32 days. And the largest home in the group, at 4,000 square feet, sold for $2.415 million in 98 days, with a $15,000 concession. 2 of those 11 sales needed a concession, a credit back to the buyer at closing, usually for repairs or closing costs. Both concessions went to the 2 largest, slowest selling homes. That tracks with what you'd expect. The harder a home is to move, the more likely a seller is to sweeten the deal to get it across the finish line. The 9 faster sales all closed with no disclosed concession at all. Here's the clearest example of what pricing right does in this market. One home on this street was listed at $1.585 million, sat for 60 days, and was pulled off the market. It came back at $1.5 million, $85,000 less, and sold in 11 days. That's not a coincidence. That's what a 60-day stall looks like once it's priced where the data actually supports. For a seller, the lesson is obvious. The first 60 days told the market something the original price didn't reflect, and the second listing corrected it. For a buyer, the lesson is just as useful. If you're watching a home in this neighborhood side past that first month with no movement, it's worth asking your agent to check whether it's been through a prior listing at a higher number. In a market this thin, that history is often sitting right there in the public record, and it can tell you more about where a seller might actually land than the current asking price does.
This home has 3 bedrooms, and I want to use this stretch of the house to talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough. What happens to a listing after it disappears from the market? Quick definitions, since these terms get used loosely. A canceled listing is one the seller or agent pulled before it sold, usually to reprice, adjust terms, or take a break. An expired listing ran out its contract term without selling and was never renewed. Neither one means the home is gone for good. Over the past year, 4 homes in Kalaheo Hillside left active status without selling. 3 canceled, 1 expired. If you've heard the phrase off-market opportunity, here's the more accurate version of that story for this neighborhood. 3 of those 4 came back. 2 came back at a lower price than before, and 1 of those 2 already sold. Only 1 listing expired without a relisting showing up in this data. In Kalaheo Hillside this year, most of the time, a pulled listing wasn't gone. It was just getting repriced.
There's a second cancel and relist story worth knowing if you're watching this neighborhood closely. A home was listed at $1.75 million, sat 82 days, and came back at $1.69 million. It's active right now, only 2 days on market, too early to know how it plays out. And there's a third one that started at $4.5 million, cut $620,000 off the price, and is still sitting at 131 days. That's the one home in this whole data set, priced well above everything else that's sold here, in the 3 to 4 million range instead of the 1 to 2.5 million range where the rest of the neighborhood lives. And it's the one still on the market. That's not a knock on that home. It's just what happens when a listing sits outside the price band the rest of the neighborhood is actually trading in.
The primary bedroom has its own bathroom, single sink, walk-in shower, more recently renovated than the rest of the home. And here's where I want to bring this back to the numbers. This home sits on 10,366 square feet of land. Every comparable sale in this neighborhood over the past year sat on somewhere between about 6,600 and just over 10,000 square feet. This lot is the largest of any of them. In a market where the land, not the square footage of the house, is what's driving price, that's the kind of detail that matters more than it might look like on a walkthrough.
While we're talking about where this home sits, it's worth knowing what else is actively competing with it right now. There are three other active listings in Kalaheo Hillside today. One at 1.69 million, the relisted home I mentioned only 2 days in. One at 1.875 million, now 59 days in without a price change yet. And 3.88 million, 131 days in a price tier by itself. There's also one home currently under contract, and that one actually went the other direction. Its list price was raised before it went under contract. Proof this market can support a price increase too, not just cuts.
One more practical number, since we're talking about what a home like this actually costs to own. The county's current assessment puts the land value at just over $1.2 million and the structure at around 80,000, which on its own tells you how lopsided the value split is here, land carrying the overwhelming majority of it. Property taxes run around $700 a month at that assessment, with no homeowner exemption applied yet, which typically brings that number down further once an owner-occupant files for one. I want to use this stretch to explain a distinction that matters if you're tracking a neighborhood like this one yourself. The rolling data on this neighborhood, the kind that averages activity over a trailing period, currently shows about 2 homes for sale here on average. But if you pull a live snapshot today, right now, there are 4 homes active. Those aren't contradicting each other, they're measuring different things. One is a monthly average, one is what's on the market this second. Here's why that gap matters practically. In a neighborhood this size, a trailing average can lag 2 or 3 homes behind what's actually available today. In a bigger neighborhood with 50 or 100 active listings, that lag barely matters. In a 4 home neighborhood, it's the difference between an accurate picture and a stale one. That's why I always pull live data every time I put one of these together, not just a monthly average. The supply side of this neighborhood backs up everything we've covered. 16 new listings came onto the market in Kalaheo Hillside over the past 12 months, and 11 homes went pending in that same window, almost matching the 12 that actually closed. When the number of homes going under contract is that close to the number of homes finishing the sale, it means very few deals in this neighborhood are falling apart once they get to that stage. That's a healthy sign for a buyer trying to gauge whether an accepted offer here is likely to actually make it to closing.
Out back, this is a big yard for the neighborhood, matching that 10,366 square foot lot number I mentioned earlier. Let's zoom out and put this listing in context of everything we've covered. 11 homes sold in Kalaheo Hillside over the last 12 months at a median price of $1.6 million. This home is listed at $1.59 million, essentially sitting right on that median. The median days on market for those 11 sales was 13 days. This home is already at day 6 with offers due today, which puts it ahead of that pace, in line with the fastest homes in this data set, the ones under 1,850 square feet, which is exactly the size bracket this home falls into at 1,770 square feet.
I want to double check these numbers against an outside source before I put them in front of you. An independent market tracker shows almost the same picture for the same 12-month window. Median sale price 1.56 million, 13 sales for the year, and a median of 14 days on market. Different data source, same story. This is a thin, fast-moving, close to full price market. If you're a buyer watching this and wondering whether that offer deadline is worth taking seriously, here's what the 12-month numbers say. This neighborhood is closing homes at essentially full asking price, meaning the average sale price divided by the average list price works out to 100% over the past year, with just 1 month of supply against an island-wide average of 3.5. That combination, full price and thin inventory, is usually what a fast-moving offer deadline looks like from the data side, not just the listing side. One caution on that 100% of list figure: it's calculated off the contract price before any concessions get factored back out. The sale that needed a $15,000 concession still shows as a full price sale in that stat. when the seller's real effective price was closer to 99%. If you're pricing off headline percent of list numbers alone, it's worth asking your agent to pull the concession adjusted number too.
If you're a seller in this neighborhood or thinking about becoming one, the lesson from this data isn't really about this specific home. It's about the two cancel and relist stories I walked you through. The one that cut $85,000 and sold in 11 days after 60 days of sitting. The one that's still working itself out after an 82-day stall and a $60,000 cut. And the one still sitting 131 days in after a $620,000 cut. Because it was priced well outside the band, the rest of the neighborhood trades in. Kalaheo Hillside is not a neighborhood where overpricing gets forgiven quickly, even with a 1-month supply cushion working in a seller's favor everywhere else.
That's Kalaheo Hillside in the numbers. If today's rates are the only reason you're hesitating in a market moving this fast, don't start with the house, start with the loan. There are close to 100 homes across Oahu right now where you can step directly into the seller's existing low rate instead of taking out a new one at today's rates. I pulled that full list from the MLS twice a month so it stays current. Click the link below, drop your email, and I'll send it over free. I'm Oksana with Island Living Oahu. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.